The stroller was empty, but the dog guarding it looked like she had already heard a baby crying where no one else could. Staff Sergeant Caleb Turner saw her just after sunrise, when the lake fog still lay low over the grass and the walking path through the small Michigan park shone with frost. He was driving back from the veterans' shelter with an empty cardboard box on the passenger seat and a paper cup of black coffee cooling in the holder when he noticed the crowd near the bench. Nobody was speaking loudly. Nobody was laughing. They stood in a half circle around a pale blue baby stroller, hands buried in coat pockets, faces tightened by the strange fear that comes when something ordinary is suddenly wrong. The stroller sat beside the path with one front wheel sunk in the damp grass. A small blanket was tucked inside. A bottle rested in the cup holder. A stuffed rabbit leaned against the side, but there was no baby. In front of it stood a black and tan German shepherd, her coat wet with morning mist, her amber eyes fixed on every person who stepped too close. She was not barking wildly. She was not snapping. She was simply holding her ground, body placed between the stroller and the world, as if the empty space inside still belonged to someone she loved. A man in a running jacket reached toward the handle. The dog lowered her head and gave one quiet warning sound, not cruel, not angry, just clear enough to stop his hand. Caleb parked before he had fully decided to. Some things reached a Marine before they reached the mind. He stepped from his truck slowly and crossed the frosted grass with both hands open. "Easy, girl," he said. "I see you." The German shepherd turned her eyes toward him. For one breath, the whole park seemed to wait with her. Then she placed one paw on the stroller wheel and looked past Caleb toward the narrow trail that disappeared behind the bare trees. Caleb stopped. That was not possession. That was direction. Mrs. Carol Whitaker, the flower shop owner from the corner, stood nearby with a yellow scarf wrapped tight around her neck. "She has been there since I opened," she whispered. "No one can touch it." Caleb crouched a few feet away, careful not to reach for the stroller. The air smelled of wet leaves, lake water, cold metal, and something faintly sweet from the blanket. Baby formula. Warmth fading. On the handle, tied beneath a smear of mud, was a torn yellow ribbon. The dog touched it with her nose, then looked again toward the trail. Caleb followed her gaze and saw paw prints in the frost leading away from the bench, then back again. She had run that path more than once. She had tried to bring someone here. Then she had returned to guard the only sign people could not ignore. Someone behind him said they should call animal control. Caleb did not look away from the dog. "Call Officer Megan Ellis," he said. "And nobody touches that stroller." The German shepherd's ears shifted at his voice, as if the words had finally made room for her message. Caleb lowered his eyes to the crooked wheel, the bottle, the blanket, the ribbon. Empty did not mean abandoned. Not this time. The dog gave one thin, broken whine, stepped toward the trail, then back to the stroller again, torn between two duties. Caleb stood slowly, feeling the cold settle deep in his chest. "All right," he whispered. "Show me what they missed." Caleb did not follow the trail yet. He knew the first mistake good people made around fear was moving too fast. He turned toward the crowd and lifted one hand, calm but firm. "Step back, please. Give her space." A few people hesitated. Then the man in the running jacket moved first, and the others followed, their shoes brushing through frost until the stroller had a wide circle of quiet around it. The German shepherd watched every step, her body still shielding the pale blue stroller, but her eyes returned to Caleb after each movement, as if checking whether he understood. He crouched near the front wheel without touching it. Mud was packed into the grooves, heavier on one side, and a thin line curved through the damp grass where the wheel had dragged. The stroller had not simply rolled here. It had been guided, pulled, maybe pushed with one hand by someone running out of strength. The yellow ribbon on the handle was torn halfway through and darkened with moisture. Beneath the blanket, Caleb saw the edge of a tiny white sock, still damp at the toe. He did not lift it. He only looked. "That is Rachel Morgan's stroller," Mrs. Carol Whitaker said from behind him, her voice trembling under the yellow scarf. "She walks this path every morning with her little boy, Liam. Bella always stays right beside the wheel." The dog's ears lifted at the name. Caleb turned slightly. "Liam." Bella made a sound so small it barely reached the people standing closest, a thin whine caught between memory and command. She touched her nose to the yellow ribbon, then stared toward the trail behind the trees. Caleb felt the morning sharpen. This was not a dog guarding property. This was a dog guarding the beginning of a trail no human had agreed to read yet. A patrol SUV rolled up near the park entrance without siren or flashing lights. Officer Megan Ellis stepped out, pulling on gloves, her eyes already measuring the scene. "Caleb," she said, recognizing him from the veterans' shelter. "What have we got?" Caleb stood slowly, keeping his body angled away from Bella so she would not feel crowded. "Empty stroller. Baby named Liam. Mother is Rachel Morgan. Dog is Bella. She has been moving between this bench and that trail." Officer Ellis looked at the stroller, then at the paw prints, then at the ribbon. "Anyone touch it?" "Not since I got here." "Good." She spoke into her radio, requesting medical support to stage nearby and another unit to secure the park entrance. The word medical passed through the crowd like a cold wind, and all the faces changed. Bella stepped toward the trail, then turned back and pressed her paw against the stroller wheel. Caleb understood the conflict in her body. She wanted to lead them away, but she could not leave the sign unguarded. He took the dark scarf from around his neck and tied it loosely beneath the yellow ribbon on the stroller handle. "This stays here," he told her. "No one takes it. I promise." Bella watched every loop of cloth, her amber eyes fixed on his hands. When the scarf settled, she looked once at Officer Ellis, once at Caleb, then stepped away from the stroller without returning. It was the first act of trust she had given anyone that morning. Caleb nodded to Officer Ellis. "Photograph the stroller before anything moves. Then we follow her." Officer Ellis raised her camera and documented the handle, the ribbon, the bottle, the blanket, the crooked wheel, and the small damp sock peeking from beneath the fold. Mrs. Whitaker crossed herself quietly. Caleb heard it more than saw it. He kept his eyes on Bella. She stood at the edge of the narrow trail, one paw lifted, waiting. The fog between the trees looked thick enough to hide a whole world. Caleb had spent years learning that danger did not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it left a ribbon, a drag mark, a dog who would not leave, and one empty place where a child should have been. Bella gave one soft whine and entered the trees. Caleb and Officer Ellis followed, leaving the stroller behind like a question tied to yellow and black cloth. Bella moved through the trees like she had memorized every inch of her own fear. She did not sprint ahead. She did not bark at the fog or lose herself in panic. She kept just far enough in front of Caleb and Officer Ellis to lead, then paused at each place where the morning had left a sign. The trail curved along the lake, narrow and slick with frost, with bare branches hanging low enough to brush Caleb's shoulders as he passed. Water tapped softly against the stones below the bank. Somewhere behind them, the crowd at the bench had disappeared into silence, but Caleb could still feel the empty stroller waiting there with his scarf tied beneath the yellow ribbon. Bella stopped near a patch of crushed reeds beside the path and lowered her nose to the ground. Caleb crouched carefully. Half hidden under wet leaves was a blue pacifier, the same color as the stroller blanket. Officer Ellis photographed it and placed a small marker beside the spot. "She is showing us pieces," she said. Caleb nodded. "No, she is showing us a route." Bella looked back at his voice, then moved on. A few yards later, she paused at a wooden rail where mud had smeared across the lower beam. Then at a torn corner of a church pantry note caught on a thorn bush. Then at a shallow line in the soft ground where stroller wheels had turned away from the main path before stopping. Each sign was small. Each sign could have been nothing. But together they began to speak. A person had not wandered carelessly through the park. Someone had been trying to leave a path behind. The trail opened into an old picnic shelter with a green metal roof and wooden tables dark from dew. Bella circled one table, then placed both front paws on the bench and sniffed hard. Caleb saw a bottle cap there, pale against the wet wood. Beside it lay a small baby cloth tucked under a smooth stone so the wind could not carry it away. That made him still. A frightened person drops things. A careless person forgets things. A mother trying to be found weighs cloth down with a stone. Officer Ellis lowered her camera slowly. Rachel was here. Caleb looked toward the service road beyond the shelter, where the gravel disappeared behind a line of pines. And she wanted someone to know it. Bella jumped down and walked to the far edge of the shelter. Her shoulders trembled once, but she did not sit. She stared toward the maintenance road, then turned her head back toward the direction of the stroller. Caleb saw the struggle return to her body. The same torn duty. Stay with the sign. Lead to the need. He stepped beside her and spoke quietly. The stroller is safe, Bella. I tied my scarf there. Officer Ellis has people watching it. Bella held his eyes for half a breath. Then she chose the road. The smell changed as they left the shelter, from lake water and leaves to damp wood, gravel, old oil, and cold metal. The fog thickened between the pines, swallowing the edges of the path until the world seemed made only of breath and gray light. Ahead, partly hidden behind a maintenance fence, stood a small shed with faded green paint and a latch hanging loose. Bella slowed. She did not rush the door. She approached it like something holy and terrible, placed one paw against the lower panel, and looked at Caleb. He heard only wind at first. Then, beneath it, so faint it could have been the wood settling, came a sound from inside. One small tap. Bella gave a broken little cry and pressed closer to the door. Caleb lifted one hand before Officer Ellis reached for the shed door. Slow, he said. Let us make sure nobody is leaning against it. The maintenance shed stood under the pines like something the park had forgotten, its green paint faded by years of lake wind, its roof dark with wet needles. A coil of garden hose hung beside the frame. A rake leaned crooked against the wall. The latch was not locked, only caught, as if the door had closed in the damp and swollen tight around whatever waited inside. Bella kept one paw against the lower panel, her amber eyes fixed on Caleb with a pleading steadiness that made the air feel thinner. Officer Ellis spoke into her radio, requesting medical to move closer to the service road. Her voice stayed calm, but Caleb heard the change beneath it. Hope had entered the clearing, and hope made every second heavier. He crouched beside Bella, close enough to feel the tremble moving through her shoulders. Rachel, he called through the wood. My name is Caleb Turner. Officer Ellis is here with me. Bella brought us to you. At first, only the wind answered. It moved through the pines and across the lake, dragging cold over the shed walls, swallowing small sounds before they could become words. Then something shifted inside. Cloth against floor. A breath. A woman's voice, thin and dry, hardly more than air. Bella. The German shepherd's body folded toward the door, not jumping, not barking, simply collapsing into the sound of her person still alive. Caleb closed his eyes for half a second, then opened them again because relief was not the same as safety. She is right here, he said, and we found the stroller. A quiet sob came from inside, followed by a tiny movement, softer than the wind, the small restless sound of a baby waking under blankets. Officer Ellis looked at Caleb, and for one brief moment all procedure and training became something very human. Rachel, she said gently, we are going to open the door. If you can move back just a little. I am back, Rachel whispered. He is with me. Caleb placed his shoulder near the door and eased it open with Officer Ellis, inch by inch, careful not to startle, careful not to rush the fragile world behind it. Cold air slipped out first, carrying the smell of damp wood, old tools, baby formula, and exhaustion. Morning light entered in a narrow blade. Inside, Rachel Morgan sat on a folded tarp beside a shelf of paint cans, pale and shaking, her hair loose around her face. In her arms, wrapped inside her coat and a blue blanket, was Liam. His tiny hat sat crooked on his head. His cheeks held color. His eyes opened once, then closed again against his mother's chest. Bella waited until Caleb loosened his hand from her collar. Then she stepped inside with the gentleness of a prayer entering a room. She touched her nose to Rachel's sleeve, then lowered it toward Liam's blanket, counting them both by scent. Rachel bent her forehead against the dog's head. Did you stay with it? She whispered. Bella gave one soft breath, as if answering was too much work after a night of being faithful. Officer Ellis knelt near Rachel, asking simple questions, checking if she could stand, if Liam had eaten, if she was hurt, if she felt warm enough. Rachel answered slowly. She had grown dizzy on the trail before sunrise. The mud had caught the stroller wheel. She feared falling with Liam, feared the cold more, feared leaving no sign at all. So she had placed the stroller near the main path, tied the ribbon where Bella would know it, and followed the dog toward shelter when walking farther became impossible. I thought people would see it, she said. I thought Bella would make them stop. Caleb looked at the German shepherd, at the mud on her paws, at the tired line of her back. She did, he said. Outside, the medical team hurried quietly across the gravel. Bella turned once toward the park, toward the stroller still waiting under Caleb's scarf and the yellow ribbon. Caleb understood her last unfinished worry. "It is safe," he told her. No one moved it. Only then did Bella lie down beside Rachel's feet, her head on the cold shed floor, her eyes finally closing for one breath. She had not guarded an empty stroller. She had guarded the only doorway humans were wise enough to see. The medical team did not hurry Rachel and Liam out of the shed like a scene made for sirens. They moved slowly, warmly, carefully, because some rescues are held together by gentleness. A paramedic wrapped Rachel in a heated blanket while another checked Liam beneath the blue one, speaking in a voice so soft it barely rose above the lake wind. Caleb stood near the open door, keeping the morning light on them, while Officer Ellis cleared space along the gravel path. Bella rose only when Rachel did. Her legs trembled, her paws dark with mud, but she followed every inch of the stretcher as if distance itself could not be trusted. Rachel reached down once, fingers brushing the German shepherd's ear. "Stay close," she whispered. Bella did. At the park bench, the stroller waited exactly where Caleb had promised it would, pale blue beneath the bare trees, yellow ribbon fluttering above his dark scarf. People had moved farther back now. No one tried to touch it. No one spoke loudly. Mrs. Carol Whitaker stood near the path with both hands over her mouth, and when she saw the baby wrapped against Rachel, she began to cry without sound. Caleb walked to the stroller with Officer Ellis and looked inside. The blanket still held the shape of absence, but it no longer felt like a wound. It felt like a message that had done its work. He untied his scarf but left the yellow ribbon in place. The torn cloth moved in the wind, bright against the gray morning. Bella watched him from beside the ambulance door, eyes fixed on the handle until he nodded. "It stays with him," he said. Only then did she climb into the ambulance and lie at Rachel's feet, nose pointed toward Liam. At Lakeview Community Clinic, warmth met them at the door. The lobby smelled of clean cotton, coffee, antiseptic, and wet coats. Nurses guided Rachel and Liam into a quiet exam room, while Dr. Susan Blake arrived with a veterinary bag for Bella. The German shepherd refused to leave the hallway. She sat facing the room where Rachel and Liam had disappeared, shoulders low, eyes unblinking. Dr. Blake checked her there, kneeling on the tile with a towel from the dryer. "Cold, exhausted, sir paw pads," she said. "But strong." Caleb brought a bowl of water. Bella looked at it, then back at the door. "He is inside," Caleb told her. "They are helping him." She did not drink. Minutes later, the door opened, and a nurse smiled. "The baby is warm. He is doing well. His mother is stable." The words reached Bella before the bowl did. Her ears softened. Her head lowered. Then, slowly, she drank. Not greedily. Not for herself alone. She drank like a guardian receiving permission to become tired. Rachel called for her soon after. Bella walked into the room and placed her nose beside Liam's blanket. Rachel's eyes filled as she touched the dog's head. "You kept going back," she whispered. "You made them see." Caleb stood in the doorway with the stroller behind him, the yellow ribbon still tied to the handle. Officer Ellis rested one hand on the frame and looked at the Marine. "You trusted her fast." Caleb shook his head. "No," he said. "She waited long enough for us to catch up." Outside the clinic windows, the fog was lifting from the lake, and for the first time that morning, the empty stroller did not look abandoned. It looked delivered. Lakeview Community Clinic settled into a quieter rhythm afternoon, the kind that comes when fear has passed through the building but has not quite left the walls. Rachel rested in a small exam room with a warm blanket over her shoulders and Liam asleep against her chest, his tiny hands tucked beneath the blue wrap. The monitor beside them blinked with a steady green light. Beep. Breath. Beep. Breath. Bella lay on a folded blanket near the foot of Rachel's chair, paws cleaned and wrapped lightly by Dr. Susan Blake, amber eyes half closed but never fully given to sleep. Every few minutes, the German shepherd lifted her head and counted what mattered. Rachel, Liam, door, stroller, Caleb. Then she lowered her chin again, allowing herself only a small piece of rest at a time. Caleb stood near the hallway window, holding the yellow ribbon that Officer Ellis had removed carefully from the stroller handle after taking the last photographs. The ribbon was torn, damp, and marked with mud from Bella's nose, but under the clinic lights it looked less like cloth and more like testimony. Rachel saw it in his hand. "I tied that ribbon on there months ago," she said softly. Caleb stepped closer. "For Liam?" Rachel nodded, looking down at the baby. At the farmer's market, there are always so many strollers. Bella learned that yellow meant his. She would find it from across the produce tents. Her fingers moved gently over Liam's blanket. This morning, when I got dizzy near the shelter, I knew I could not push the stroller through the mud and carry him at the same time. I was afraid I would fall. I was afraid no one would hear me from the shed. Her voice trembled, but she did not hide from the truth. So I left the stroller where people would see it. I thought Bella would stay with the ribbon. I thought somebody would stop. Bella opened her eyes at the sound of her name, then rested her chin against Rachel's shoe. Caleb looked toward the hallway, where the stroller stood near the wall, clean now, but still empty. Empty, and yet no longer cruel. She did more than stay, he said. She built us a map. Rachel covered her mouth with one hand, and for a moment, the only sound was Liam breathing. Pastor David Collins arrived with a paper bag from the church pantry and a cup of coffee for Caleb. He did not speak right away. He looked at Rachel, Liam, Bella, then the ribbon in Caleb's hand. Some prayers, he said quietly, come tied to things small enough for us to miss. Caleb gave a faint nod, though his eyes stayed on the ribbon. Years before, in his own family, there had been a sign he had not understood soon enough. A small change in a voice, a missed call, a quiet room everyone thought meant rest, when it had meant need. He had carried that silence into every year after, folded deep under discipline and duty. Today, a dog had taken something just as small, a ribbon, a sock, a bottle cap, a cloth under a stone, and turned them into a language loud enough to save 2 lives. Officer Ellis came to the doorway with her notepad lowered against her side. The shed is being checked. The park will add clearer signs and an emergency latch before the week ends. Rachel looked relieved, but her eyes returned to Bella. Can she stay with us tonight? Dr. Blake smiled from the hall. If she agrees to food, water, and no more heroic patrols. Bella sighed as if the terms were disappointing but acceptable. Caleb knelt beside her and placed the ribbon gently near her paws. She sniffed it once, then pushed it with her nose toward Rachel, as though returning a message now properly delivered. Caleb felt something inside him loosen. Not vanish, not heal completely, just loosen enough for breath. He looked at the stroller in the hallway, the mother in the chair, the baby sleeping warm, and the German shepherd finally resting. The world had almost mistaken emptiness for an ending. Bella had known better. She had stayed with the question until Mercy found the answer. By late afternoon, the small Michigan town had begun to carry the story with the quiet care people use when they know a miracle came close to being missed. It moved from Lakeview Community Clinic to the flower shop, from the flower shop to the diner, from the diner to the church pantry, not as gossip, but as gratitude trying to find a place to sit. People came without crowding the halls. Mrs. Carol Whitaker brought yellow tulips and placed them near the clinic desk beside a small bag of dog treats. A retired teacher brought a knitted blue cap for Liam. Someone from the veterans' shelter left a paper sack of sandwiches for Rachel. Nobody asked for details. They only looked through the glass toward the stroller in the hallway, its handle bare now except for Caleb's dark scarf folded across the seat, and they understood that emptiness could be a kind of alarm if someone was faithful enough to stand beside it. Bella slept in short pieces. She lay near Rachel's chair, then rose to check the stroller, then returned to the baby, as if her heart still moved along the route she had made through the park. Rachel tried to tell her she could rest, but Bella only blinked, patient and unconvinced. Dr. Blake checked her again and smiled. She is going to keep counting until everyone goes home. Caleb knew that look. He had seen it in Marines after long nights, the need to count every face, every door, every shadow, even after the danger had passed. He stood near the hallway wall with Pastor Collins, watching Bella lower herself beside the stroller wheel. She chose the place people would see, Caleb said. The pastor nodded. Sometimes love knows where to wait better than fear knows where to hide. Officer Ellis came in with updates from the park. The maintenance shed would be repaired before evening. New signage would be placed near the service road. A water station would be added by the main bench because Rachel had asked for something useful instead of something grand. And the stroller? Rachel asked from the room, her voice still weak but steadier than before. Officer Ellis looked at the pale blue frame in the hall. It is yours whenever you are ready. Nothing will be removed without you. Rachel turned her eyes to the doorway, where Bella lay with one paw touching the wheel. Keep the ribbon safe, she whispered. Caleb lifted the folded yellow ribbon from the small paper envelope on the table. It is safe. Bella raised her head at the faint sound of the cloth, ears lifting as if that ribbon still spoke in a language made for her alone. Caleb walked over and held it where she could smell it. She sniffed once, then looked past him toward Rachel and Liam. Message delivered. People found. Duty nearly done. Later, when Rachel was able to sit up a little more, the nurse rolled the stroller into the room. Liam slept in his mother's arms, warm and peaceful, while the empty stroller stood beside the bed like an object waiting to be forgiven. Rachel reached toward it and touched the handle. I was afraid people would see this and think I left him, she said. Caleb shook his head. Bella made sure they saw more than that. Rachel's fingers closed around the handle. You did too. Caleb looked down, uncomfortable with gratitude that belonged mostly to a dog. But the word stayed with him. Outside the clinic window, fog lifted from the lake and sunlight touched the parking lot in pale strips. Bella finally climbed onto the folded blanket Dr. Blake had placed beside the bed. She rested with her head facing the stroller, her body turned toward Rachel and Liam, guarding both the sign and the answer. Caleb sat in the hallway for a long time after that, hands folded, coffee untouched. The old silence inside him did not disappear, but it no longer sounded the same. It had been answered by paw prints in frost, a torn yellow ribbon, a mother who refused to give up, and a German shepherd who understood that an empty place can still be full of love. Rachel and Liam stayed at Lakeview Community Clinic overnight, not because the worst was still happening, but because everyone wanted the good news to have time to become real. The nurses dimmed the room lights. Dr. Blake brought one more warm towel for Bella, and Pastor Collins left a small paper bag of rolls from the church pantry on the windowsill, where morning light would find it first. Bella slept beside the stroller instead of on the blanket prepared for her. She kept one paw resting against the wheel, her black and tan coat rising and falling with slow, tired breaths, her amber eyes opening whenever Liam made the smallest sound. Rachel watched her from the bed, one hand on the baby's back. She still thinks she has to guard it, she whispered. Caleb stood near the door with his arms folded, his dark scarf now clean and folded over one chair. Maybe she is not guarding it anymore, he said. Maybe she is just making sure it gets to go home. Rachel looked at the pale blue stroller, at the empty seat that no longer frightened the room. I want the ribbon back on the handle, she said. Officer Ellis, who had stopped by after her shift, opened the small paper envelope and placed the torn yellow ribbon in Rachel's palm. The fabric looked fragile beneath the clinic light, frayed and stained, but Rachel held it like something strong. This was not decoration, she said. It was how Bella knew Liam's stroller. Bella lifted her head when the ribbon moved. Her ears rose. Her nose reached forward. Rachel smiled through tired eyes and lowered the ribbon so the dog could smell it. Bella breathed it in once, then rested her chin on the stroller frame, satisfied in a way no spoken sentence could have explained. The next morning, Caleb drove Rachel, Liam, and Bella back toward the park in his old pickup, while Officer Ellis followed behind. The stroller rode folded in the back seat, the ribbon tied again to the handle, not perfectly, not like a new thing, but like something that had earned the right to remain torn. The park was quiet when they arrived. The bench stood empty. The grass still showed faint marks where the crowd had gathered. Near the trail, city workers had already placed a temporary sign pointing toward the service road, and by the maintenance shed, a new emergency release waited to be installed. Rachel asked to stand for a moment by the bench. Caleb unfolded the stroller and locked the wheels. The clicks sounded clean in the cold air. Liam slept against Rachel's shoulder, warm beneath a blue blanket. Bella stepped to the stroller, touched the yellow ribbon with her nose, then looked toward the trail. For the first time, she did not pull that way. She simply stood, remembering without needing to return. Mrs. Carol Whitaker appeared from the sidewalk, carrying yellow tulips wrapped in brown paper. She placed them near the bench, not as a memorial, but as a thank you to a place that had been understood in time. Rachel looked at Caleb. I thought empty would make people afraid of me. Caleb shook his head. Empty made Bella brave. Rachel lowered Liam into the stroller. The seat was no longer a question. It held breath, warmth, weight, and peace. Bella walked beside the left wheel as Rachel pushed slowly toward the path, her paws steady now, her duty changed from warning to companionship. Caleb watched them move beneath the pale Michigan sun and felt the old silence inside him loosen again. Some signs come torn and muddy. Some answers come on four tired paws. And sometimes the thing that looked empty was only waiting for love to return to it. 3 weeks later, the lakeside park no longer looked like a place holding its breath. The fog was gone. The grass had dried. The bench had been cleaned. The service road had new signs, and the maintenance shed now had an emergency release that opened with one easy push from inside. Near the main path, the town had placed a simple water bowl for dogs beside a small planter of yellow tulips. Rachel had asked for something useful, not something grand, and the town had listened. Caleb Turner arrived near sunset after dropping supplies at the veterans' shelter, still in his dark jacket, carrying a paper cup of coffee that had gone cold before he finished it. He stopped beside the bench where the stroller had waited and looked down at the place in the grass, where Bella's paw prints had once crossed back and forth like a prayer written in mud. Then he heard the soft roll of wheels behind him. Rachel Morgan came slowly up the path, stronger now, both hands on the pale blue stroller. Liam slept inside beneath the same blue blanket, warm and safe, one tiny hand curled near his cheek. The torn yellow ribbon was tied to the handle beneath a clear protective wrap, and beside it fluttered a new ribbon, bright as morning. Bella walked beside the left wheel, her black and tan coat shining in the low sun, her ears relaxed, her steps steady. She did not guard the stroller now. She accompanied it. That difference made Caleb feel something in his chest unclench. Rachel smiled when she saw him. "She still checks the wheel before we leave the house," she said. Caleb looked at Bella. Smart habit. Bella came to him with calm recognition and pressed her forehead against his knee. He rested his hand between her ears. "Good girl," he whispered, though the words felt far too small for what she had carried. Pastor Collins joined them near the bench with a small bag of rolls from the church pantry, and Mrs. Whitaker set fresh tulips in the planter without saying a word. For a while, they simply stood there while the lake wind moved gently through the trees. Rachel reached into the stroller basket and handed Caleb a short strip of yellow ribbon. "For your truck mirror," she said. "So you remember to keep looking." Caleb held it in his palm. Years ago, there had been a silence in his own family that he had not understood in time. He had carried it like a locked room inside him. But now another memory stood beside it. A stroller that looked empty, a dog who refused to leave, a mother who used the last strength she had to leave a sign, and a baby breathing softly while evening light touched the lake. Caleb tied the ribbon around his wrist instead. "I will remember," he said. Bella returned to the stroller and lay down beside the wheel, not from fear, but from love shaped into habit. The old torn ribbon and the new one lifted together in the breeze, one marked by the morning that almost took too much, one bright with the peace that followed. Caleb watched them move and finally understood that not every empty place is an ending. Sometimes it is a signal. Sometimes it is mercy waiting beside the path. And sometimes it takes a German shepherd to stand guard long enough for the human heart to arrive.